Welcome to this week's installment of the speaker series. I'm going to turn it right over to Michael Feerer to talk to us about trees.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm delighted to see quite a number of people here. I'm always happy to talk about trees and forests, and there's a lot of different facets to that. Everyone hearing me okay? Okay. All right. Yep. Just double checking that. And still hearing me okay? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, so I'm executive director of Walk a Million Trees Project, which is a 501c3 nonprofit here in Bellingham. And we're just into the third month of our second year as a full year as a 501c3. We've been very warmly embraced by the community. And so we have a number of different pieces to our mission, which I will quickly go through, but mostly what I'm going to talk about today is about how in your neighborhood, or in your case, talking to the student body here, the campus, how you can get involved directly in improving our community's climate resiliency. So that's just one facet of what we do. And if I can advance the slide here. There we go. So that's basically what we're talking about today, climate resilience via trees. So we have this three-pronged mission. When people hear our name, Walk a Million Trees, I get a lot of people saying, whoa, you're going to plant 1 million trees? And actually, that's not necessarily true. Now, we may eventually get to that, but that's not the goal. It's only one of 3 goals. So we plant in uplands within Whatcom County. We're only doing this in Whatcom County, not internationally or nationally. That's our focus, Whatcom County. And the reason why I say uplands is because we've got a wonderful nonprofit already in town, the Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association, which is well-funded and doing great work for 25 plus years in the riparian areas of our county. You know, meaning for those of you that aren't familiar with the term riparian that might be watching on Zoom, I'm talking about, you know, creeks, rivers, watershed, you know, anything within a shouting distance of a tributary, particularly in regards to salmon. And so the work they do is outstanding. We love partnering with them. We often do on work parties. And and so we have a kind of a complementary relationship where they're doing the riparian areas and we're focusing on the uplands. Now, the uplands traditionally and historically, especially in this county, have been largely underfunded in terms of any kind of restoration work. And so what you see in a lot of places in this county is invasives just overrunning open fields and, you know, climbing up trees, et cetera. And I'll get more onto that in a moment. But I just wanted to draw the line kind of between the 2 different ways that we complement other nonprofits in town. Now, there's also a Whatcom Land Trust who acquires gems of properties that has special significance, and they work on restoring and taking care of those. So, but all the other land in this county really hasn't been much addressed. And so that's the niche that we're stepping forward into on the planting side. Now, on the protection side, we have 2 key focuses. One is on mature, significant trees in neighborhoods. I will get into that more in a moment. And then the other part is protecting mature forest in our key watersheds. We have one of the largest unprotected drinking watersheds in the state with Lake Whatcom watershed. It's particularly sensitive to issues that and impacts from logging and forestry around it. So we, together with several other local nonprofits, work on reducing that load onto the lake. And likewise, we're concerned about anything that's within shouting distance, basically, of the Nooksack River or its tributaries. But that leaves an enormous amount of land in the county that's still being logged or, just out there. And there may be some members from the forest community and watching this on Zoom. And I say to you that we are not an anti-logging organization at all. We recognize that wood is a part of our society. It's right here on the table here and all the seats in the audience. And so we're not just going to just stop logging or that kind of thing. And sometimes we get portrayed, we and some of the other local nonprofits get portrayed that we're, anti-logging. We want to knock out the remaining logging industry and things of that sort. That is not the case. We hope to be very inclusive. We're only saying that there's about 2% of the logging lands actively logged now in the county that we're paying attention to, again, in the key drinking watershed or right along shouting distance of the tributaries. Everything else, there's working forest, continued need for that wood, and we recognize that. The third piece of our mission is the connect piece. That's like events like today, where we increase awareness and understanding about trees and forests. Besides something like this today, we have had a lot of success doing Pickford film events. We try to do 2 or 3 of those a year. We just a few months back, towards the end of last year, showed Elemental, which is all about redefining our relationship to wildfire. Did any of you in the audience see that? If you did, raise your hand. Probably not. It was a while back. And so anyways, that was a sold out show. It's very strong interest in this community, even though we haven't had a mega fire event yet. But there's a lot of things that can be done to prevent that from happening while still respecting the needs of having healthy, diverse forests in our county. So 3-pronged mission: plant, protect, connect. We work on all 3. And why are we doing that? Because we have a climate and biodiversity crisis. You all here in the audience know that. Maybe much of the community watching on Zoom knows that as well. But we're getting more and more climate impacts here in this county. It floods on the Nooksack. In the last few years, severe flooding. People still displaced to this day from those events. We also had in the summer extremely dry heat dome or severe dry summers that haven't been seen here for a long, long time. In fact, are almost unprecedented, which are creating potential fire issues and other impacts, a lot of heat stress. There's a number of studies that point to how, cardiac cases and things of that sort have a direct relationship to the amount of canopy in an urban area. And there's, and I'll touch more on that in a moment as we circle to that. So we're doing this to enhance the health and resilience of our local communities. That's really the bottom line here. So today's about how to become a neighborhood tree ambassador, as I said earlier. And again, for you on campus, substitute the word campus instead of neighborhood, and it would be all equally relevant. So trees provide multiple benefits to us all. This is a little diagram we borrowed from American Forest, which talks about some of the basic ways that trees benefit us. I won't reread through this or anything, but we're talking about qualitative issues, not just quantitative. So, cooling, reducing stress, supporting long-term health, like what I said earlier about the cardiac connection, safety buffers, clean air. That's one of the fundamental things that trees provide is that oxygen, and spaces for us to connect in the community. There's quite a number of people, a high percentage of people in Bellingham that most likely moved to Bellingham in the first place because of the tree coverage that was here. So and because that's a thing that addresses people right at the heart. So there's all those things. And then there's kind of the more technical stuff of what trees do. It's a long list. I mean, it's capturing carbon, which is really essential right now. Habitat and biodiversity, riparian benefits. So even though we're doing the uplands That's complementary to what's being done like by NC in the riparian areas. So it all ties together. You can't, separate those. It's reducing stormwater needs and flooding events, stabilizing slopes, which actually saves the city money, for instance, saves energy by cooling buildings, buffers from traffic, areas to explore and enjoy. And of course, a real, character beautification element of our quality of life here. Trees do all of that without asking. I mean, it's like just what they're about. So here's the thing. You may think we got a lot of trees here, and we do compared to, say, where I grew up, San Diego. Like in San Diego, it's like a forest. What's that? So, but the fact of the matter is that we are losing tree canopy in this community, not only in Bellingham proper, but out in outward areas as well. You can see in this map here a general sense of where most of the forest and tree areas are. It's largely on, like the south side of Bellingham kind of has a super abundance of that. And then we got kind of the central area, not so much. And then it starts to get back into some more tree canopy towards the north, although not as mature as some of the other forests. But here's the key diagram. Now, the city right now has been spending 2.5 years, and they got another half year to go on looking at their urban tree canopy. And they were surveying it through LiDAR satellite data and on the field research. And one of the things in their phase 2 report is this map. Now, the version in their report happened to, and I don't think this was intentional, happened to make the yellow, orange, and reddish colors not as vibrant as the green colors on the bottom. What we did here is we equalized the saturation of those colors. So what you're seeing on this is slightly different than what's in the report, just in terms of balancing the color palette. And with that, you can see that the yellow, red, and orange, particularly in the central neighborhoods of our city, which represent significant tree loss, are pretty predominant. I mean, there's a lot of loss there, and that's just over the study period between 2006 and 2018. And that has continued on, particularly post-pandemic, as a lot of development proposals have come forward. These are usually in the urban context, mature, large trees that we're losing. Not, I'm not talking about little seedlings or little trees. And you can see on a neighborhood basis here, the Arbor Day Foundation does there's a website that they have about the tree equity score, and you can see the differences in the scores between neighborhoods here. So part of our effort within Bellingham is to focus more tree attention on these neighborhoods that have less trees than the other neighborhoods, where there's this inequity that's going on that reflects also, social and economic inequities. It all kind of ties together, and in a historical basis. So we are losing tree canopy quite significantly, and I'm not even, today I'm not talking about out in the watersheds and elsewhere. I mean, there's losses going on out there. I'm just kind of focusing more in the urban context. So urban trees, not only are they being lost from development or, in some cases, natural die-off or wind and things of that sort, they're dying extra much now due to invasives and stress. So one of the big tree killers is English ivy. And on campus here, you got buku English ivy all around the edges. And one of our to-do things is to, to liaison with the campus landscape people and maybe with some of the local environmental groups, student groups, and see if we can get some work parties going to save those trees from that ivy. Because once that ivy gets up to the canopy, it's almost 100% guaranteed the tree will die. And typically what will happen is after a couple of years in the canopy, the tree weakens, and then in a windstorm, the top half snaps off, and you'll have this big snag like you see on the left picture there, which actually is in my yard. I didn't know about this years and years ago. I've lived in Bellingham for 32 years, and not unknowingly allowed it to happen to one of my mature trees. So that's an example of what happens, and it's it's very easy to remove. There's a very simple technique that we teach, and I'll touch back on that a little bit later. So we need tree advocacy to catch up. We can't just do our daily thing. We need action, both at a policy level and at a hands-on level. And you can see on this slide how our cities in this county, Bellingham, Ferndale, and Blaine, are behind, not up at the lead or even equal to many other communities in our area here. We are behind, and we're feeling it with the loss of trees. And numerous other communities have advanced tree protection policy ordinances in their city code to protect mature trees far beyond what we have here. Now, the urban tree management, urban forestry management plan that the city's doing has about another 6 months to go. This summer, when they produce the third phase of their 3-year study, there will be recommendations and an opportunity for the public to give feedback. I encourage all of you to plug into that at that time, because that'll be a time to raise your voice about greater tree protection here in this community. So as I mentioned, development permits have accelerated, canopy loss has occurred, and because we're kind of stuck in this 3-year study right now without any policy action, significant harm's happening meanwhile. So it's kind of a frustrating situation and very sad. And so we're trying to do what we can meanwhile while waiting for this, at least in Bellingham, waiting for this study. There's developments that we've been pushing back against. This is one that's that's proposed for along Meridian, right across almost kitty corner from Cornwall Park, which is on the lower right there. It's a housing development. The developer, even though they claim they have green credentials, they actually have, from a design standpoint, pretty much maxed out that site. And all the trees in that circle will go. It's, as you can see visually here, it's like basically like erasing about a fifth or so of Cornwall Park. The trees are exactly the same maturity, majestic major conifers. It's going to be a severe loss there. So we've been doing what we can to try to push against that. Some of you may have seen down towards Edgemore and Fairhaven and stuff, the Protect Mud Bay Cliffs yard signs. We've been part of that effort to assist that neighborhood and those folks that are concerned about that, about the Mud Bay Cliffs, which have numerous implications, not only for the shoreline there, but the numerous mature trees above. If you haven't been over to that way, over by Clark's Point and walked along the beach, like you see on the right picture there when it's low tide, it's an amazing little spot that very few people know about in this community. But it has easy access from the beach when it's low tide. I encourage you to go out there and take a look. So there's these 5 reasons then that I've gone over about why become a neighborhood tree ambassador. We feel that if you bring it down to the local and even less than local level, meaning neighborhood level or campus level, that's where real action can happen to build climate resiliency and to make a positive impact. I talked earlier about some of the implications locally that we're feeling, some of the impacts. We had floods. These are all pictures from Whatcom County. More flooding, up in the, I think this is Berkeley area. And then these heat waves that I talked about earlier, which are stressing out trees and killing western red cedars in particular, but some of the other trees as well are at risk. So now, what can you do to become a neighborhood or campus tree ambassador? There's some qualities I think that are important in that process or in stepping into that role. It'd probably be good that you enjoy connecting with neighbors, or in this case, other students, share ideas and motivations and solutions about nearby trees. And you would need to be open to learning some new skills and knowledge about trees and how to create positive change. And then, of course, in your heart, if you love spending time in nature, that's a natural affinity. And if you feel passionate about trees or forests, this is a way that you can benefit the environment very hands-on without, having to go through, having to go afar or anything like that. And then just that you're curious and interested in learning more about significant trees in your neighborhood and community. It's not really asking a lot to step into that role. I imagine perhaps a number of you might be fit that profile. But let's talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of this, of what this means. So whether it's campus or neighborhood, one role that you could do that would be very helpful would be to become a tree ivy spotter. If you even just made paper notes and got them to us, or noted, put a pin on Google Maps on your phone, or you see ivy and got that information to us, that would be wonderful. We are trying to citywide map the entire city, first concentrating on greenways and parks, but spreading out into private lands and semi-public lands like here on campus. We want to know where all that ivy is so we can strategically time our work parties and organize more work parties to save those trees. And so it's both private and public areas that we're talking about. Again, the slide about the ivy that I showed earlier. We even have handouts that you can pop in someone's mailbox or leave in someone's door if you notice ivy in their yard and maybe they're totally unaware of what ivy's doing to their trees. A lot of people say, oh, it's climbing up my trunk. Isn't that pretty? All that green and stuff. And, it's very benign until it gets up into the canopy. So a lot of people, I would say perhaps even the majority of people in this community don't know about ivy. So the more you can spread the word, that's great. We have on our website, easily printable. These are little half-page things that you can give to other people, neighbors, roommates, whatever. So that was one piece, ivy. The second piece is find exceptional and heritage trees. These are the biggest trees in each neighborhood. Now on campus here, you got a little different situation. Campus trees have already been pretty well, the major ones have been pretty well identified. So maybe this one doesn't so much apply to the campus. But if in your neighborhood that you live in, it is applicable. And if you can bring that information to us and to the neighborhood association of where you live, then that can get incorporated once that urban forestry study by the city is done. That can open up a doorway to add more protected significant trees that are in our urban neighborhoods. Now, right now, the city only does the top definition you see there. The significant tree is 6 inch or greater, which doesn't really give us any information, basically. We are hoping that through the study process that we're advocating for 2 other categories. One is exceptional trees, and then the other would be heritage trees. One is more about the size of like 16 inches or greater at chest height, and that it's a native tree. And the other is more about the character of the neighborhood and what may have been there, even if it's non-native. There's some amazing, special trees in each neighborhood that we encourage to be kept. Now, online, this is a page from the city's website. They have this list of some of those trees, what they call exceptional trees, labeled. There are at least 4 or 5 times this. This is a very old list that hasn't been updated. So this is something that, by getting this information, all the eyes that are here, whether it's on Zoom or in person here, if your eyes can be out in the community and starting to notice these things in the trees, these special trees, then we can all collectively bring that information together. Now, a few neighborhoods have begun to do this. Sunnyland just last year, with a little bit of assistance by us, but mostly on their own, have identified, and they have on the Sunnyland Neighborhood Association website, the significant trees they've identified. And likewise, the York neighborhood has. Maybe some of you live in that neighborhood. I don't know, but there's a cool thing on the York Neighborhood Association website as well. So now the third thing you can do is organize a neighborhood or campus work party. We will support you totally with that. We hold 3 or 4 work parties every month. And, if you gather together, like 15 or more people, or if you just go to our website and plug into one of our work parties, that's a way to get hands-on involved. I get people all the time after our work parties telling me, oh man, I feel so good because I finally can do something about the climate or about biodiversity or about our trees. Instead of waiting for politicians, instead of waiting for, what may or may not happen internationally, at least we can do something hands-on right here. And sure, in the global picture, it's a drop in the bucket, but still it's important. We live in the Cascadia region. Cascadia, everyone talks about the Amazon being the lungs of the earth. Actually, the Cascadian forest, meaning from like Southeast Alaska all the way down through Oregon, is almost as big as the lungs as the Amazon. So we need to support that as much as we can. And that means both in the urban areas and in the outer, rural areas. So we'll give you all the support, with tools and all the, training, et cetera, at the work party. All you have to do is collect the people together and let us know. And we'll pick a site together, or you might find a site and maybe you've seen ivy somewhere. We can, just support you through all that process. We'll do training about, English ivy, how to remove it correctly and safely from trunks. Doesn't involve any tree climbing or special skills. It's very simple. This is just a little portion of a 1-page thing that we have about that. That's also on our website. We'll also show you, like, if you're removing blackberry, how you can, instead of worrying about how you're going to get that off-site and dispose of it and things of that sort. Himalayan blackberry is an invasive that's displacing trees in our county, and we have a way that's been proven to show where you can chop it up basically and kind of put it on a big waffle, like imagine a 6x6 waffle made of sticks, and you elevate that ivy up in the air, that green ivy, and it dies basically and composts up in the air. So there's ways to do that without having to worry about the transport issue. Also, if you notice in your neighborhoods, either little conifer seedlings popping up, which occurs more in some neighborhoods than others, or if you want to get involved with planting trees, tree planting season is right now. In fact, our first work party for actually planting trees, that glorious moment of putting that tree seedling in the ground, we're talking about 2-year-old seedlings, so they're about this tall. And they're native conifers usually, or big leaf maples. That glorious moment of doing that, that's from now through the end of March. So if you really want to get involved with that, look on our website, click into the work parties page of our website, and you'll see the latest schedule. And all you got to do is click a few things to sign up and you'll be in. Also, those in the neighborhoods, you can apply for a City of Bellingham Small and Simple grant that can support tree planting efforts in your neighborhood. And we can even help you create a tree celebration like we did with the Sunnyland neighborhood last year. Now, the fifth thing you can do is advocate for trees in your neighborhood. Talk with people that live around you about trees and what you're learning about trees as you work through some of these other things. You can track nearby proposed developments. There's pages we can point you to, web pages that the city has for major developments that so you can see what's coming up nearby that you might want to advocate for more trees on. We're trying with developers, just a sidelight here, approach developers to motivate them to plant more trees than what's required. Now, the city does have some basic requirements about tree canopy. We feel they need to be enhanced, but we're trying to find different motivators for developers to step forward even further, and that's a work in progress. Also, there's a lot of unauthorized tree removals in this community. There's companies that are tree removal companies, arborists and others. Most of them are very ethical. A few aren't, unfortunately. And so, when they need a permit to cut a tree, sometimes the unethical ones won't do that or even mention that to the landowner. And so that leads to major trees going down. You can keep eyes and ears out for those kind of things. And by spreading the word, you help to prevent those kinds of things happening. Right now, there's fairly complicated, but once you're clued in, there's kind of a flow as to how trees are managed through the city. If you're a neighborhood tree advocate, this is something that we can clue you into in like a half hour, and you'll understand what the flow is for permits, so that if people ask you about that from your neighborhood, you can be a source of information for them. Now, of course, again, this doesn't relate to the campus here. And then if you're really extra motivated, you can widen your tree focus beyond the neighborhood. You can volunteer at our work parties in other areas, of the city. Most of our work parties now are in parks and greenways. Occasionally we have them in semi-private places like schools and the hospital and things of that sort. We can give you more information and training about native trees and plants. You can advocate, like I suggested before, this summer about community-wide urban tree canopy issues, and give feedback to the urban forestry management plan. And then you can support and volunteer at an admin kind of level to our tree protection efforts that go beyond just doing a work party. So a lot of you here in the audience probably have, environmental knowledge and, concentration that you're working on. This would be very complementary to the kinds of things that you're learning now, and be a way to do some hands-on work and probably would look pretty good on your resume too. We're involved in a lot of things. I've just touched on today mostly this neighborhood thing. So you can see just real quick, without me getting into each one, we've got a lot of different items on our plate, so to speak. So if any of these things interest you at all, feel free to reach out to us either through our contact page or volunteer page on our website, and we will respond promptly and see if we can plug you into things. We can totally, our entire team right now is all volunteer, including myself. And we work around schedules all the time. So if you have, classes or whatever, or those of you on Zoom that, might have work schedules or whatever, our entire team works around those kinds of things. So it's not a problem. And most of our team just puts in, an hour or two a week. It can vary. So we're very flexible with that. We're mostly interested in just getting the right skill set and the right people that, feel strongly and, and enjoy working together. So those are the 6 areas of how you can be a neighborhood tree ambassador. And again, we will support and facilitate you all the way with each aspect of that. Now, those of you in the audience and the greater audience, if you feel inspired by the kinds of things you see on our website, of course, we would be very happy to be the recipient of any donations. We have, every every $10 basically pays for another tree planted, or it supports our advocacy efforts to an equivalent level. It's all tax deductible. You can sign up for our newsletter today and get, stay up to date with our monthly newsletter. We don't send any spam or any, extra emails or anything. So it's not, you're not going to get your inbox overloaded. Like I said earlier, you can join a work party, or you can volunteer a other kind of skill. So you can check on our website, on our volunteer page, you'll see what our current needs are. But if you have a special need that, isn't listed there and you think it might be useful to us, reach out to us anyways. It's kind of a two-way process here. We've incorporated in our team a number of people who have reached out to us that we weren't even really asking for. But, again, we've been warmly embraced by the community. So, we enjoy that two-way interaction. If you are interested in donating, we have a lot of ways to do it. Actually, number 2, Amazon Smile is going away. Some of you may know that. Amazon's pulling that off the board for everybody. But we have a giving app that makes it, easy and, 1 minute you can do it. We've got a roundup change app where either with your debit card or credit card, it can round up to the next dollar, and that automatically would go to Walk a Million Trees project. And there's actually a bank that we link to that donates a small portion of the interest while still giving you a very high return of interest. And so there's a lot of ways to do it. You can have a birthday fundraiser on Facebook, for instance. So we have a lot of ways. It's all on our website. I encourage you to go there. And so to kind of close here, overall, this is about, it's not about like me, one person or any one person in our organization trying to do a big action. It's about making a movement here, a community of like-minded people coming together to take a lot of small local actions. That's how we can get stuff done. This is a very action-oriented nonprofit. And we're hoping to build a movement, a community of tree lovers and forest lovers who are each doing their part, one tree at a time. So if you want to reach out to me directly, you can see my email address on there and our phone number. And like I mentioned earlier, we have our newsletter. And if you sign up on our website to our newsletter, you will get this really cool PDF that's about the planting and care guide to trees that's customized just for Whatcom County. We worked with a number of arborists and others, landscapers and others to develop that. So it's kind of a authoritative, but yet not thick resource for anyone that's interested in planting trees. And so with that, I will be ready to answer questions. Okay. Let me go back to that here. Yes.
How well are foresters doing in terms of replanting clear cuts that we see on the hill?
Well, so it depends if it's private land, private forest, or if it's like DNR land that's been auctioned for a forest clear cut. There's timing issues with replanting. Usually the cycle is a 40-year cycle of trees that are grown to about 40 years and then they're cut in those working forests. So there's a difference between, some of you may know this, there's a difference between working forests and diverse, healthy forest ecosystems. Working forests are kind of like plantation forests, for those that you don't know. They're meant to, they're designed to grow wood for wood products. So they're usually a monoculture kind of planting, very, very different from a, what some people have called a legacy forest, that's older trees that mixed in with, diverse native species, lots of understory and things of that sort. So what I'm talking about in the 40-year cycle is the working forest, okay? Now, there's different views about in the community about what to do about legacy trees, where those exist. We come down on the side of saying that legacy forests should be protected in our watershed at least within shouting distance of the Nooksack, because those both have direct immediate implications to water, et cetera. Like I mentioned earlier, the kinds of legacy forests we're talking about in those areas is very, very small percentage, probably almost no economic impact. We're talking about 2% or less of the actively managed forest lands in the county. So I don't know if that answered the question.
I'm curious if these clear cuts are being replanted.
Generally, yes, because that's, if it's in a working forest, that's the whole point, is to do that cycle over and over again. But that doesn't, it's still, if you're looking up on a hillside, like I happen to live over by Lake Patton. And so when I look up on the East Hills there, I can see a recent clear cut there. It's going to take a number of years before you stop seeing that, because those seedlings, they may not be planted for a year or two. And once they're planted, it's going to be quite a while before that visual marker is starting to go away, so to speak. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, oh, sorry, I was supposed to repeat the question here. So the question was, if I can summarize it, so like when a corporation goes bankrupt, sometimes they don't have to follow through and clean up whatever mess they left environmentally. And so the question was, if a forest company or individual becomes unable well, for whatever reason, bankruptcy or other reason, to do anything further there, what happens? It's a very interesting question, actually. I honestly don't know the answer to that. So, but if you come to our website and ask that, I'll be happy to get someone to research that a little further. I think it's a great question. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a question about, along with trees, what other actions do you think could be taken to better a local community?
Yeah, so the question was, along with trees, what other actions can be done to better the local community? So sometimes people say to us, well, it's great what you're doing about trees, but what about the pollinators and, all this other stuff? And we're totally on board with that. It's just that we don't happen to do the hands-on work to plant those. Those are other organizations in town that do that. We team up with like city parks, for example, like some of our work parties coming up, we're planting the trees and city park staff are planting the understory and smaller shrubs and bushes and ground cover, things of that sort. So it's a complementary relationship. We're just trying to strengthen the tree piece, because that's often kind of the structural, for lack of a better term, kind of the framework that begins to rebuild a habitat. But the entire picture is important. Trees are just one piece of the picture for sure. Yeah. So the question was in regards to English ivy removal, if it's a situation where the renter identifies it, but yet there's a homeowner there, what can be done? So I would suggest that handout that I showed, that perhaps the renter person can first give that to the whoever the homeowner or property owner is, and so that they have an opportunity to get a little educated about it or to see what the reaction is. Now it could be, in fact, it's probably likely a certain percentage of people will say, hey, don't touch my trees, it's my property, and that's, we can only do what we can do. There's such an immense English ivy problem here that, we've got to get, kind of like the diminishing returns point. We've got to get to that 80% point to really begin to dampen it back down. There's always going to be some English ivy here. We're not going to totally remove it. I mean, in fact, what we do is, because the tree itself needs saving, and if it's at risk, we do this ring circle right at shoulder height, strip down the ivy just from that height. All the ivy above will die off on its own without the lower part. And then we clear about 6 feet around the base. That gives the tree maybe 3 or 4 years at most of breathing space before that ivy that might be on the ground around it comes back up. Our intent is that whether it's in a park or private property or whatever, that what we're doing is that first tree saving wave, basically, a first tree saving action. And then there can be a second and third wave of reducing that ground ivy, which is what was contributing to the problem in the first place. Ivy gets spread by birds. You know, there's a certain time of year when ivy has little berries. Birds spread it around. That's one way. It also has very tenacious and active roots during part of the year. So, so it's always going to be around. But yeah, our handout would be ideal for, I think, your situation. Yeah.
How does the ivy actually kill the tree?
Yeah, good question. So the question is, how does the ivy actually kill the tree? So as it's climbing up the bark, it will begin to suck nutrients through the bark somewhat, but not enough to kill the tree. It'll just weaken the tree a little bit. And generally, you won't really notice it. It's only kind of seen at a microscopic level. And then if it's allowed to continue to grow, when it gets up in the canopy, and then basically takes over the leaves and branches and dominates it so much that the tree isn't getting the same sun and you know, oxygen exposure, I mean, carbon exposure that it normally would. And the ivy's competing for that at the you know, small branch leaf level. Yeah.
Yeah, someone was curious, if you could just keep the definition of heritage tree.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the question was the definition of a heritage tree. Let me go back to that slide. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. So this is what we're recommending, and this is modeled after those other ordinances in other communities. So remember that long list of all the other cities that had ordinances that were very, you know, proactive about trees. This is modeled after that. So the idea is to identify separately the trees that are of significance. And, you know, in different communities, draw the line different places. Some say 12 inches, some say 20. We're suggesting 16 might be about right here. And so 16 inches or greater would be those very special trees. And then in addition to that, there's other trees in many of our neighborhoods that may not be quite as thick, but may be significant in special ways to the history of that neighborhood, or they may be thicker and it's not just about size, but it's about what they contribute to the neighborhood. Some of those trees might be on private property. One of the things that we're hoping to get underway, maybe not this year, but early next year, is to have an arborist on our team who can give tree support to those special trees. Because sometimes those trees land on, you know, are on properties where the property owner may not want to spend $2,000 or $3,000 to, you know, slightly prune it and, you know, keep it in good shape. You know, that can be expensive. So, you know, so sometimes what historically has happened is they'll cut the tree down to save long-term expenses about the tree. We hope to solve that. We haven't done it yet, but we are hoping to find the right people to make that happen, especially as the city goes further with their urban tree canopy program, so that we can offer for very low cost on a, you know, maybe sliding scale basis an arborist that can do that work for those special trees. Any other? Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, you know, don't trees, of course, have a significant lifespan, and maybe some of them are reaching it. And so what do you do about those trees? So that's, again, where an arborist that's not, you know, that's not running a company earning money from arborist work can be very valuable, where they can give advice about that. So, you know, many of the major trees here, there's a number of like gigantic sequoias in town, and there's all these Douglas firs and stuff. Many of those trees live well beyond, you know, 500, 600 years or longer. So, so it's not often that you see, you know, one that's approaching end of life, but it does happen occasionally. And, you know, of course, some trees, whether they're huge or not, are, you know, hazardous for whatever reason. Either they were planted too near a home, or, you know, they got blown down in the wind. And of course, those trees got to be removed. I mean, it's not like I mean, it's heartbreaking that to lose those trees, but we recognize that there's, you know, some tree situations where there's nothing you can do about it. So, but again, if we can get to that 80% point and be very much more proactive on a whole bunch of trees, then losing a few here and there to all these other reasons will not be that significant. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So the question was the Arboretum right here on campus. Many of you may have noticed that there's quite a number of ivy embedded trees there. We already had one work party there earlier, late last year to remove some of that. There's well over, I think, about 65 or more trees in the upper part of the Arboretum that have ivy on them, as well as all along this bottom edge towards the campus. There's quite a number of more trees there. So there's more work to be done. The Arboretum is kind of jointly managed by city parks, as well as to some degree the campus landscape people, more in the interface between the two. So it's largely in parks, the city parks jurisdiction. If you have an interest in seeing more of that ivy removed, feel free to reach out to us because we will have more work parties in Arboretum this year for sure. They aren't scheduled yet, but once we get through our planting season in March, then we'll start shifting gears back to ivy, and we will definitely have Arboretum work parties. I would love to see a bunch of you there.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Yep. As always, please feel free to come down to the front if you have any follow-up questions like that. Thank you so much. That was great.
Oh, good.